Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Romeo and Juliet. In this video, we are going to be taking a detailed look at Act 3, Scene 1. It's a little bit of a longer one, but that's only because the scene is so full of conflict. There is a lot to talk about. So let's get started.
So a lot happens in this scene. We open up hot day with Mercutio and Benvolio having a conversation, and they're having a conversation about quarrelling, about who quarrels the most. Benvolio's really worried about something kicking off with the Capulets, and he's warning Mercutio that they better get away, and Mercutio is like, I don't care. And would you believe it, who appears but Tybalt? And you can completely and utterly see that encapsulated in these two lines that I love. Benvolio says, by my head, here come the Capulets, and Mercutio, by my heel, I care not. Immediately, conflict arises between Mercutio and Tybalt, which we'll look at in a little bit more detail momentarily. Romeo arrives on the scene, and Tybalt is fully expecting him to sort of accept the challenge and just get on with a bit of a duel, as is Mercutio. And so when Romeo is like, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to fight you, nobody can really understand what's going on, particularly Mercutio, who isn't just baffled, but he's kind of disgusted by it. He finds Romeo's lack of desire to kind of stand up for himself and fight and retaliate against being insulted so dramatically by Tybalt. He finds it shocking and horrifying, which is why he ends up being the one fighting Tybalt. And it is during this fight that actually Tybalt stabs Mercutio, fatally wounding him. And it happens just in a moment where sort of Mercutio and Romeo was trying to get between them. Tybalt stabbed him, but kind of under the arm of Romeo. So there is a discussion about whether or not it's actually Romeo's fault for trying to get in between them that meant that he died. Now, for Romeo, obviously, he has said, no, I'm not fighting, and his best friend has ended up being murdered because of this. And so this totally changes his outlook on what to do next, and he and Tybalt also get into a horrifying scene of violence, which ultimately ends in Tybalt's death and Mercutio and Romeo having to do one very quickly, because obviously the last that we heard from this chap, Prince Escalus, was that if there was any more fighting, it would be punishable by death. And so Benvolio tells him to go. Prince Escalus comes onto the scene, and everyone else is gathered. So you've got the Capulets, you've got the Montagues, everyone is claiming the right to vengeance and saying that, you know, Romeo should be killed as payback for Tybalt, but actually no, Romeo shouldn't be killed because Tybalt killed Mercutio. It's all a bit of chaos. Benvolio speaks speaks to Escalus about what happens and gives a sort of blow by blow of the scene. And in the end, Escalus decides that because so much blood has been shedded already, and the reason that Romeo got into the skirmish in the first place was because of the fight between Mercutio and Tybalt, that he wouldn't be put to death. Instead, he would be exiled. He would be banished from that moment forward. But he did also say very clearly that if Romeo comes back into the city, then he will face death. So not great, considering he's just married Juliet. Right, let's look at the scene in a little bit more detail. It opens with pathetic fallacy. Notice here, this is Benvolio right at the very beginning. I pray thee, good Mercutio, let's retire. So let's go in. The day is hot. The Capulets abroad, and if we meet, we shall not escape a brawl, basically. So that pathetic fallacy is in the heat, okay? And it's really mimetic of that building tension and that boiling conflict. You know, I said in a previous video about Tybalt's rage just sort of simmering underneath, behind all of this action. that we've been watching unfurl. And now on this hot, hot day, it's going to happen. And again, we've got a repetition of the adjective hot. Yeah, the day is hot, these hot days. The mad blood is stirring. What a metaphor. So that's about anger. That's about passion. That's about being quick to temper. So imagine this mad blood, this hot blood, tension's high, and it's all stirring up. It's all ready to go. Mercutio's not that worried. He's still having a little joke. Yeah, and he accuses Benvolio of like being a fighter. Yeah, he's like, sorry, you're warning me. Let's look at you. And he lists, there are about 5 things that he lists as examples of Benvolio losing his rag over ridiculous things. So if you look at this, thou wilt quarrel with a man that hath a hair more or a hair less in his beard than thou hast. Thou wilt quarrel with a man for cracking nuts, having no other reason but because thou hast hazel eyes. So obviously these 2 that I've selected are ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? They're utterly ridiculous reasons to fight. We don't really believe them. In fact, Benvolio is like, maybe that's you. Note the fact that Mercutio, Shakespeare writes his little bit here in prose, whereas Benvolio's very sensible ideas are written in verse. So it's kind of a difference in temperament being shown through form there. But I think the most significant thing here is that what Mercutio is joking about is the idea of fighting over inconsequential things. And that's obviously so representative of the fight that's about to happen. It's such good foreshadowing, because even though this fight feels like one of the most important things, it would appear to Tybalt, what's it really over? It's over the fact that Romeo went to the Capulet house. That's it. It's inconsequential, yet it creates huge conflict. Okay, this is a bit where Tybalt arrives, and he asks, he's like, where's Romeo? And Mercutio is immediately quite confrontational with him, because he immediately says, well, let's not just have a word, let's add a word and a blow together. So he's already sort of suggesting that he's up for a fight. Now, this bit that I've popped on the screen for you is quite interesting because it can be interpreted in a couple of different ways. So Tybalt says, Mercutio, thou consortest with Romeo. Now, consort means sort of hang around with. So you could read this as Mercutio saying, Tybalt saying, well, come on, Mercutio, you hang around with Romeo, so where is he? In which case, Mercutio's response, which is consort, dost thou make us minstrels, because it can also mean like play, would appear that he is like being really, really impulsive, quick to temper, all of the things that he just accused Benvolio of. Fiddlestick is obviously a metaphor for sword. His, that shall make you dance. We already know that he was calling Tybalt this sort of, like he fights to music, like he fights like a dance. And this bit here, zoons, consort, zoons, is a really bad word back then because it's a shortening of God's wounds. So it's very, very blasphemous. It's the equivalent of a bad swear word now. So if you read it that way, then that suggests that Mercutio is being quick-tempered, irrational, and just quite happily getting into a fight. And that does work with what he's been saying before to Benvolio about, how he just doesn't care. The fact that when he speaks to him, he says, but one word with one of us, couple it with something, make it a word and a blow. That suggests that it's Mercutio's fault. However, would you believe it? Consort can also have sexual connotations. So it is also possible that Tybalt is insulting Mercutio by suggesting that he and Romeo are lovers and calling them homosexual, which of course was very, very taboo at the time. And if that's what Tybalt meant, then Mercutio's reaction makes a bit more sense. The other possibility is that Tybalt simply meant you spend time with Romeo, and Mercutio is deliberately reading into that verb consort in order to be able to continue with this fight, with this conflict. It's ambiguous. It could be a bit of both. But regardless, a fight has happened because of one word, consort. So again, harking back to that idea about inconsequential things. Note again, we are in prose here. And for the lovely, wondrous peacekeeping Benvolio, we are back to verse, sort of suggesting again that Benvolio is elevated, and he offers a warning. We talk here in the public haunt of men, either withdraw into some private place and reason coldly of your grievances, or else depart. Here all eyes gaze on us. So he's like, we've got to get out of here. We can go together and talk about what's wrong. But note, okay, he uses the adverb coldly. So he's saying we can go off together, but we're not fighting. So we're not going to have this heat. We're going to be cool and calm, yeah, in our discussion of what's gone wrong. This little declarative sentence, here all eyes gaze on us, is so important, because it's important that we understand that there are witnesses to all of what is about to happen. It is in the public sphere. A really important theme in so many of Shakespeare's plays, the idea of public versus private. They are taking private matters, independent individual grievances, and airing them publicly. But then Romeo rocks up, and so Tybalt's like, oh, right, done with you. Now we're ready. Now we're ready for business. But of course, a little bit of dramatic irony. What we know, but Mercutio doesn't, is that Romeo now sees him as kin, as a cousin, because he is married to Juliet. So he says, Romeo, the hate I bear thee can afford no better term than this. Thou art a villain. Note the way that it is stated as a declarative, like it's fact. To Tybalt, Romeo is nothing more than a villain. And then Shakespeare uses this great juxtaposition to show, to demonstrate how polar Romeo's feelings are at this moment. He says, Tybalt, the reason that I have to love thee, Juliet, doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting. So Romeo recognizes that he is being really insulted, and that what he should be doing is acting appropriately. Appertaining actually means appropriately. So he's saying, I get it, that this is the kind of greeting that should have me in rage, but there's a reason that actually I love you, and therefore all I can say is, I'm not a villain, you don't know me. This is again about masculine honor, yeah? It's his sort of reputation is being tarnished in this moment. And Tybalt feels exactly the same. Boy, this shall not excuse the injuries that thou hast done me. Therefore turn and draw. Nice little imperative there. Commanding him. Turn and draw means get your weapon. He calls him boy. So really trying to demonstrate his superiority and Romeo's inferiority. But this word here, this noun, injuries. He sees that Romeo has insulted his honour by coming to his house, by coming to, well, the Capulet house. He sees it as such a slight that it has become an injury. Lovely bit of repetition. I do protest, I never injured thee. Okay, so what you've got here is a combination of repetition between their words, and then also juxtaposition, because for everything that Tybalt says about hate, Romeo says something about love. I do protest I never injured thee, but love thee better than thou canst devise, till thou shalt know the reason of my love. And so, good Capulet, which name I tender as dearly as mine own. Remember all the way back to the balcony scene. Be satisfied. So nice little imperative back to Tybalt, but note how different these imperatives are. Turn and draw versus be satisfied. More juxtaposition demonstrating their characters. He doesn't realise, he doesn't understand why Romeo has this new loyalty to the Capulet family. So to him it doesn't make sense. Romeo knows that he can't say anything yet, so he just has to keep trying to keep the peace. Mercutio does not like this. Sometimes when people read and watch this, they think that Mercutio is talking about Tybalt there, you know, because they just see the words dishonourable and vile and they go, oh, negative words, that must be about Tybalt. No, he is talking about Romeo. In this moment, in this exclamative, this list of adjectives: calm, i.e. because he's not fighting back; dishonourable, i.e. it is shameful that he is not fighting back; vile, so note the way that these adjectives escalate, the negativity of them amplifies as you get through the list. So he's disgusted, it's vile. And then check out our abstract noun, submission. The thing that he thinks is vile and disgusting is the fact that Romeo is not asserting himself against Tybalt. Okay, he thinks that it is not masculine, that he should be standing up for himself, and he really thinks it. We can tell that through the exclamative, we can tell that through the interjection, and we can tell that through the fact that a big old fight kicks off. And in this moment, we have one of the most powerful moments, bar the very end, is when Mercutio is stabbed. He says, I am hurt. Another just very simple, straightforward declarative. A plague on both your houses, Montague and Capulet alike. A plague, okay? He is calling on disease to hit the houses. He wants punishment. I am sped. Is he gone and hath nothing? Now, Benvolio and then Romeo, it seems like they don't quite understand what's going on and how badly injured he is. So Benvolio asks the question, what art thou hurt? Remember that this happened like sort of like with Romeo in between them, so it probably would have been quite difficult to see. And Mercutio uses euphemism. He calls it just a scratch. He downplays it completely. A scratch. But then, Mary, it's enough. And I think that little bit there, 'tis enough, whether it's said loud enough, if that's down to the director, is how we understand that it is really serious, although Romeo doesn't realise. No, 'tis not so deep as a well, nor so wide as a church door, but 'tis enough. 'Twill serve. It is enough. Repetition of there. It will serve, as in this is what's going to do for me. Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man. So immediately we've got puns here. So we're punning on the word grave, or in this case, a grave man, adjective grave, meaning serious, but obviously the noun grave, somewhere where he will be buried. He repeats the image again, a plague on both your houses, zoons, so we've got our little Shakespearean swear word, a dog, a rat, a mouse, a cat to scratch a man to death, a braggart, a rogue, a villain that fights by the book of arithmetic. So he's talking about Tybalt here, braggart, rogue, villain, and then back to the kind of joke about the precision of his fighting. But this is the bit. Why the devil came you between us? I was hurt under your arm. So that question that he asks demonstrates how much he sees Romeo as being part to blame, or even entirely to blame in this moment. Now, this is Mercutio on his deathbed, and he's still managing to find ways to pun and kind of make joke and make light. But there are also these little moments, these little sentences, you know, like 'tis enough, 'twill serve, that demonstrate the severity, not to mention the final utterance, repeated 3 times over, a plague on both your houses. They have made worms meat of me. Oh, what a metaphor. Again, another reference to what will happen to his body in the grave. Now, you know, if we're to talk about whose fault Mercutio's death is, I think there are a couple of different options. In this moment, Mercutio is blaming both the Montagues and the Capulets. He's blaming their feuding, which is why at the moment of his death, it's like he curses them. There's no softness, there's no forgiveness in death. There is just frustration and rage, which is a dreadful way to die. He also quite clearly blames Romeo. The whole reason for him fighting Tybalt was because he didn't think Romeo was standing up for himself or protecting his honour. But if you take that, then you could say, well, actually, perhaps the thing to blame for Mercutio's death is this idea about masculine honour, this desperate need to continue to prove yourself. And then the other question is, well, is Mercutio's death his fault? Because he didn't need to fight Tybalt, and he didn't need to start that antagonistic behaviour with Tybalt at the very beginning. But in this moment, Mercutio blames the feud. So that is certainly adding to this picture of how much damage this grudge has already created. And Romeo, having gone from this peacekeeping state, kind of mirroring Benvolio, he flips to the other side. Okay, so he says, my friend hath got his mortal hurt on my behalf, my reputation stained with Tybalt's slander. So he's recognizing, he's realizing that this has happened because he didn't stand up for himself. Mercutio felt obliged to. So he is taking on some of the blame. But he also blames something else. Oh, sweet Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate, and in my temper softened valour's steel. So this is quite a prevalent view of the time, that being in love made you weak. And note, we've got again this idea of him being effeminate, so it's a slight on his masculinity, the feelings that love created. And in this feeling of love, valour's steel, it's a nice metaphor here, is softened. So he's like, I wasn't tough enough. And then the idea of Tybalt enters his brain, especially because Tybalt comes back onto the scene. There's no real reason given for that other than feeling that he still had a job to do, like he still needed to get his revenge on Romeo. But he says alive in triumph, so this is still Romeo, so that exclamative shows like the horror that he feels at the idea of Tybalt being alive with Mercutio slain. So note that lovely antithesis, or juxtaposition if you prefer, between alive and then slain. Away to heaven, respective lenity, and fire-eyed fury be my conduct now. That's the metaphor. That's the tell. No more does he want to have his valour's steel softened by love. All he can have is fire-eyed fury. So I struggled to get that out. Lovely alliteration there as well. And so obviously in fighting him, he says, now Tybalt, take the villain back again that late thou gavest me. Not take back the fact that you killed my friend, take back the insult of villain. So we've gone back to that original insult. Romeo's like, I didn't deal with it properly, and that means that Mercutio is dead. So now I'm going to fight you for that. Don't you call me villain. And he's doing it knowing that Mercutio's soul is a little way above our heads. So it's almost like he's now needing to prove to Mercutio that he is a man, that he can fight, he can do that thing, he will defend his honour, he's not going to let Tybalt get away with it. Which is why he says either thou or I or both must go with him. So someone's going to die. It's either going to be Tybalt, Romeo, or the both of them, and they will go up and meet Mercutio. And of course, it is Tybalt who dies at Romeo's hand, meaning that Romeo is fortune's fool. So much to be said in this exclamative. The metaphor, that fricative alliteration, which just has so much like passion and rage in it. The idea of him being fortune's fool, this comes back to the idea of fate, that in this moment he recognises that he was fated to do this, and he is almost like the puppet of fortune having his way with him. Everything he realises in this moment is ruined, which is why he has to flee the scene. Okay, nearly through. I know it's a big scene. The repercussions of this. Obviously, the prince comes onto the scene, as do the Montagues and the Capulets. Note the form here. we're now suddenly in rhyming couplets. I beg for justice which thou prince must give. Romeo slew Tybalt. Romeo must not live. And they're all the way through, which, bearing in mind, rhyming couplets are often used at the end of scenes and at the end of soliloquies, and they're normally like the really kind of hard-hitting, powerful moments. It's almost like saying that this moment is so powerful that everyone speaks in rhyming couplets. Note the juxtaposition here. Romeo slew Tybalt, Romeo must not live, so death and life, again, those oppositions that come up so often. The prince, Romeo slew him, he slew Mercutio, who now the price of his dear blood doth owe. So nice metaphor there about where life or death is owed. Montague obviously comes in with his ideas and explaining that, of course, it's Tybalt that would have been killed, so Romeo's just done the job for the prince already. And that is why the prince says, and for that offence immediately we did exile him hence. Let Romeo hence in haste, else when he's found that hour is his last. Bear hence this body and attend our will, mercy but murders, pardoning those that kill. So Romeo has been banished in that moment, and we've got this idea that when he's found, the hour will be his last, so he will be killed if he comes back to the city, which is of course foreshadowing, because of course that's exactly what's going to happen. Lovely bit of personification just to end this off. Mercy but murders, pardoning those that kill. So he's basically saying that if he was to show more mercy, it would result in more murders, which is a fair point. But actually, in this moment, what he is inadvertently doing is creating more problems. And actually, this is another kind of moment where this is like a plot catalyst for the rest of the play and the actions that occur. Right, obviously, fortune's full, yeah? We've been working towards this moment and this Romeo's realization that it was almost his destiny for this to happen. Death, clearly, major theme. Familial duty and love. Now, this is such an interesting one here because you've both got the love for the family that is fueling the feud, but you also have Romeo's newfound loyalties, which sit in familial duty because of his love for Juliet. But it is that love for the Capulets that actually ends in this fight, because if it wasn't for that, Mercutio would not have got involved. Masculine honour and reputation, hugely relevant themes. If you've got a question on that, then this is definitely a scene to be looking at. And then the idea of repercussions, blame, responsibility. Who is responsible for these deaths? Right, sorry, that was a long one, but it is such an important scene and such a cracking scene. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope it was helpful. Any questions, comments, you just pop them in the comments box and I will get back to you. Subscribe if you haven't already, and then you can be alerted of all of the other videos coming your way to help you with your exams. Brilliant. See you soon. Happy revising.